everyone. Welcome back to Human Powered. I'm Jessica Becker, and I'm here with my co-host, Jen Rubin.
Hello, everyone.
And we have a guest with us today who is very familiar with the Human Powered podcast, a former host, Jimmy Gutierrez.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
We're so excited to be here with you, Jimmy. It's
Dude, y'all are doing a great
morning.
job. Can I say that? That I'm really enjoying everything that you've been doing. So natural podcast hosts here.
Well, thank you so much. And I was thinking about this. We didn't intentionally do this, but I'm like, oh, are we interviewing every former podcast host of Human Powered? So we'll get Dasha, and then we'll have the whole crew. Yeah.
I think the answer is yes, we're just interviewing all of our favorite public humanists in the state. So, yes.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Yeah, you've had some good hosts or some good guests. I've been listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, actually, so the last couple of guests that we've had have really had their hands and feet in the storytelling community. And that's been really nice to talk about because, of course, storytelling is such a huge sort of current in everything that has to do with the public humanities. And what you kind of come at this work a little more from a journalism perspective, I think I'd say. I don't know how you'd say that, but do you want to talk a little bit about how storytelling works in your work and what you do? Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question to kind of jump off like who am I? Why am I here? I would say over the last 10 years, I've kind of been bouncing between journalism and then storytelling, narrative storytelling, short form storytelling, even some chat casts in some sort of way or the other. Currently, I'm working in Milwaukee as a journalist for a public radio station. And kind of like my roots were in public radio, so it's nice to be back. A wild time to be back with the CPB cuts,
Yeah.
which we can get into. But I think to the question of the power of storytelling in journalism, like why do we do it? What is the purpose of it? I can just point to a story that's happening right now in Milwaukee, and that's the flooding that's been going on. I don't know who's been paying attention to Southeast Wisconsin or Milwaukee, but there's been historic flooding, I think it was the second largest rainfall the city's ever gotten in our history, recorded history over the weekend. And it's been interesting the way that both national and local media has picked this up, right? Because there's been this focus on these really dramatic pictures of floods and people losing everything and just the devastation, which is valid. Like it's a tragic time for a lot of people, family included. Um, but I mean, a story that I just ran was of these group of organizers who they have this campaign going on now where they're trying to clear out 500 homes within 10 days. And so they've been doing this just they've kind of picked this up themselves just off of this like need to feel like to help out. Um, and so they just went around to homes and backyards and they've been clearing out spaces. They taught themselves how to use water transfer pumps, putting out calls on social media, who needs help. And I think really what they've done is inspired the community, probably really kicked in elected officials to do more than have press conferences and direct people to the crisis hotline 211. What does action actually look like, right? And so I think what the power of news and journalism does when used well is not only shine a light on the folks that are doing really good work, but also how do people get activated? Like, how do you make sense of a situation, whether it's a really positive situation or a tragic situation in the community, to make a place better, to take action. And I think the young men that we were able to focus on in our stories kind of are a testament to that. This is the power of journalism. This is the power of storytelling, and this is a way to also like activate a community and elected officials to, I don't know, to take care of the place that they're represented to do so,
Right. To do their job
to do
well.
their
Yeah.
job in a more direct term.
Yeah. I really appreciate, what you're saying there. And it reminded me, I don't remember how many years ago, it was maybe like my second year at Wisconsin. And I did a series, wanted to sort of talk about what's happening to our climate. And so did it through water just to say like, how is the changing temperature of water impacting your community, right? And so did a story about what does it look like on Lake Superior? What does it look like on
Mhm.
reservation land? What does it look like in the driftless, which we should talk about that episode at some point.
I love
And
that episode.
yeah, and then also what does it look like in Milwaukee? And it was a woman who works with, I think it was Reflow, sort of educating us that like maybe in Milwaukee it looks like how do you drain to the sewers or like whatever it is like
Yep.
it looks super different, but it's the same issue, right? And so yeah, and so to find the people who are like, what can I do in my community about water, whether it's a watershed or whatever. So yeah, I appreciate that. I also saw, videos of guys who were, I think, just taking some sort of tool and opening, like cleaning out a something on a street so the water could start draining. Like it was sort of that simple, or maybe it's just the
Can
algorithms
I?
shared it with me,
Yeah,
but yeah,
no. So that
yeah.
was one of the men that I highlighted, and
Oh
I think
yeah,
that's probably one of the first videos I saw Sunday morning when I'm like, what are people doing? Like, how are people getting activated? What are people doing to kind of like help out? And that's Montreal Kane. And it's funny
okay,
because Montreal was going to church, but his basement flooded Sunday morning. He was awake, luckily, and his story and kind of uh, how he is making sense of the floods and how it's like kind of rehashing a ton of grief for him is really interesting because he lost two small kids and one of the first things he did was went to his daughter's gravesite, which was like under feet of
uh,
water. So this was like a very personal thing for him, but
yeah,
he's very active in ministry. And his pastor called him up that morning, and he was like, "Hey, we do not have service today. Like, obviously, a lot of people are dealing with this." And Montreal was like, "It's a Sunday. My body is used to work on Sundays. Like he does video and music at his church. And so that was a C stand that's used for like lighting for video work. And he just took it and he went from drain to drain, the first drain that he thought of that has flooded in the past. And he just started clearing drains with this equipment that he uses for lighting. And so I think it's just like you can use anything to get
yeah,
involved.
right.
All you need to do is just show up, and I thought that was really incredible. Again, so much I would have loved to get into the story, and I think other people have, but um, yeah, I mean, humanities in action, really.
Yeah, I love the particular story about the tool, and it's just going to date myself, but it reminds me of this like Ani DeFranco quote from the 90s or something, which was like,
Yes.
every tool is a weapon if you use it right, or something, which has always
Mhm.
stuck with me. So anyway, that kind of called that up for me. The idea that he's using like a thing he used in the church to clear the street drains is it's a pretty great image.
That is
Absolutely.
pretty cool. So we referenced the stories from the flood episode of Human Powered Podcasts, and I just want to mention another sort of thing that the Wisconsin Humanities did that is very under the radar, but connected with, the tools that you have. So Wisconsin Humanities had a grant program for 50 years. And when there was all that flooding in the Kickapoo, one of the things that the director, Dina Wurtzel, did is reached out to all the libraries, the tiny, tiny little
Mhm.
libraries in the Driftless, and actually was able to give small grants to help those libraries specifically save their collections and do whatever they needed to do, replace carpeting, all these things, because libraries matter in our community. They're, for all the reasons we know, important community spaces, public spaces, archives of so much. But the bigger story that we covered was also funded through a grant, and we covered it in the Human Powered Podcast. And it's also a really good example of how this work sort of connects all these different pieces, because there was influence that the project itself had in the community and in the policy and that kind of thing. Do you want to kind of recap that episode, Jimmy?
Yeah. I was lucky enough to host season one of the Human Powered Podcast. And background is I love the Driftless region. I'm from Milwaukee. Everything is like flat and quasi-industrial, like where I grew up. Um, and I remember going out to, I think the furthest west I ever went to was like Reedsburg for baseball tournaments when I was a kid. And I'd been out to Madison and it felt like a different world. But I didn't discover the Driftless until I was an adult. And I was like, what is this magical land
Yeah.
of, the rolling hills and just the small little towns, the incredible cheese, the rivers that ran through everything. it was magic for a city kid. And this story, the thing is with the landscape and the rivers that run through it is that it is also very susceptible to flooding. And there's a long history in the Driftless of this pretty catastrophic flooding, and including some of my favorite places in the Driftless. And so this episode kind of like looked at the flooding. This was all following the 2017 flooding. And what was incredible as far as like someone who works in narrative storytelling as well is that the public libraries and the storytelling community there had already done this work for us. They had collected all of these oral histories of people who had experienced the flooding firsthand. And so for me, what was really exciting was just to be able to like hear the recorded histories, hear how people had talked about this. The folks that interviewed the residents who had experienced this, I'm remembering the old man who had like lived in his house forever. Um, and I think we started the episode off with his story about like waking up to his house being like completely flooded, was that they were also being interviewed by community members. And so it was really special, I think, to hear the way that people really familiar with both the area and those experiences were interacting and kind of like leaving space and having conversations about this. But it really did kind of get to the work of like why we do what we do, right? Like, why is it important to collect these oral histories? Why is it important to have this collective knowledge, collective history that we can like share on and listen to? And yeah, Stories from the Flood was a major grant winner. It was a story, I think, that surprised me. I think it kind of like inspired me. I saw a lot of that kind of energy of the first responders and the ways that people made community shelters, provided mutual aid from the Driftless during that time in Milwaukee, and I've been seeing it over the last couple days. Maybe subconsciously, that's also influenced my reporting over the past couple days too, is because I know people are taking care of people, and it's been really powerful to see that here. And it's just this kind of intuitive thing I think that we feel when faced with these really tough disasters, which this is what Wisconsin can expect
Yeah.
going forward when we're thinking of a changing climate, both in the Driftless and in Milwaukee, is more of these kind of pretty catastrophic flooding weather events, unfortunately.
Yeah, one thing, and because I think this was maybe the second episode we worked on, and I just started at Love Wisconsin, and I do a lot of storytelling stuff, but I've never was part of putting together like a complex, I haven't worked in a newsroom, so I was never part of putting together like a complex piece. And so to me, it really does sort of bring together like all the reasons why all this matters, like storytelling, historians, whatever, because you have these like incredible oral histories. We listen to these, the person whose farm was flooded, the first responder, all that. But then you have sort of the historian or the scientist sort of come in and say, this is why flooding happens here, or Milwaukee, like this is why like Milwaukee's been disinvested in this way. Like so yeah, I really feel like it kind of was sort of helped me shape thinking about, well, how do you put together these complex stories? You need both, right? I mean, because I do think about that in general for just a personal story, like story first, but you need enough context and history to contextualize a story, but not so much you smother it, and so I
Exactly.
feel like we like totally hit it just right, that
Yeah. Yeah.
episode.
What's the
Yeah.
balance, right? So that
Yeah.
people are leaning forward because we love stories.
Right.
We make sense of the world through stories. But also you need to understand what happened.
Yeah, and to that same point, it's kind of hard sometimes to explain the importance of the humanities. But I think that you're someone that has really maybe intuitively understood it, but come along over the last few years, and now you're on the board of
I'm on
Wisconsin
the board. It's
Humanities, right?
terrifying.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I think didn't you come on the board like 2 weeks before the funding was cut or something? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. I was
yeah,
like, it was interesting because Project 2025 had existed. And so we knew, well, I think a lot of people in media knew that, okay, we are targeted in this
yeah,
plan or in this
yeah,
project from a new Trump administration as our organizations that do things like, the human powered, the podcast, and share this history, collect this history. So I didn't know what it meant for humanities, but we quickly found out,
yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
not ideal.
No, overnight. It was dramatic. The first episode of Human Powered, this current fourth season, we interviewed Dina. So we went through the play-by-play of those
Ugh,
dramatic days when we found out. And
it was, can I
it was
say,
dramatic.
it was so this is my first board experience. I was very honored to be asked. And, we can talk about what humanities means and why I have a little bit of beef with that word. But I think the thing that was really interesting was coming on at such a time when I knew I had worked with humanities, for a couple years. Jen and I also do the Odyssey Behind Bars stuff, and I heard Brandon's interview. That was great. The thing was though is that because it has such a history, the board and folks like Dina that care so much and have put so much of themselves into it, it was it was really tough to be so new to something that I also cared about and I could see a vision forward while everyone was grieving the loss of
Right.
it. And it was so heavy emotionally for so many people that it was wild to be witness to that. And I don't know. Obviously they didn't do it intentionally to indoctrinate me to humanities, but I feel a stronger sense of connection to like why this matters, having like trauma bonded in my first like
Yeah.
couple weeks
Well,
on the board.
that's an interesting point, right? The old guard who like shepherded it all these years, so
Hmm.
like the personal loss in addition to the bigger loss, right? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, Jimmy. So tell us your beef with the word humanities. Because I mean, I got my own issues. I worked for Wisconsin Humanities for 24 and a half years. I've got
You've been
my own
sitting on it.
issues.
Okay.
I've been sitting on it, but I also love the word because it has the word human in it. So t tell us your beef with the word.
Yeah, so yeah, being a human is great. Like, yes, to humanity. The thing is I don't think it says anything about what we're doing. I don't think I think it is an aspirational kind of word that points in a direction, but doesn't give us a sense of what it is. And and I say that because as someone who's been in storytelling for 10 years, I I've seen the power of stories. I've seen how stories and like having the ability to tell your own story is incredibly empowering. And I feel like the word and kind of just the way that it's been branded and marketed also there's also a disconnect for people to understand the power that is in what we're doing. And so now as a board member, which is again quite terrifying, one of the fun things I've been doing is working with Jim O'Connell out of Stevens Point and one of his students, Lucy, shout out Lucy. And what we're doing is we're trying to create some social media like literacy almost on what the humanities are by deconstructing the humanities, right? Like we're not even worried necessarily about that word about humanities. We're going to mock it kind of. Sorry, Jessica. We're going to mock it a little bit, but then hopefully that's an introduction to people to kind of like be curious and like lean into what are we actually talking about. And so, over this summer there was this phenomenon that happened on the highest form of media, aka reality TV, called Love Island. And it's interesting because so many people got activated because it was such a toxic season of Love Island. And where am I going with this? You're probably wondering. Who knows? But what I think was really interesting is that through social media, TikTok, think pieces, is that a lot of people were trying to make sense of how people were dealing with this very manufactured situation. What even is reality TV? Who are these people who have all this PR training that are coming to these situations? And it is, whether we like it or not, the stories that we're telling ourselves currently. And I think something as goofy as Love Island, something as maybe impactful culturally as Sinners, Ryan Coogler's new film that came out over the summer, all of these things are humanities. All of these ways that we're making sense of the world around us through stories, through examining other people's lives are humanities. And I think that what I really want to do is just kind of is respect the word, respect where it came from and the work that it's doing, and also make it applicable to people to make sense of the world around them. And how do we create like a wider um, net to catch people and be like, actually, what you're thinking about here is humanities. And is humanities the word for this? I'm not sure. But I know what we're all trying to do, and that's make sense of our world and our lives through stories. So that's my beef. We can hash it out, Jessica. But I think it's a limiting term, and to it's a limiting term to a very expansive idea.
That's a great way to say
Did I
it.
make my case?
I mean, I don't disagree with a single thing you said. And I always talk about it's how we make sense of the how we make sense of the world. And then I really, for myself personally, have found that context is everything. It's sort of what Jen was just saying about the flooding, like, and without those those ways of understanding and finding meaning, then we are less than human, right?
Mhm.
That is what we are. That is our gift in the world, being human, is
Yeah.
that we can see uh, where we've come from and we can imagine where we're going.
Right. And
And
it's so
that's
easy not to. Like that it's I think that's the thing is there's a like a seductiveness to like not want the context, to not want to fully understand someone. And there's a lot of propaganda to encourage folks to like not want that context. I'm thinking of like the cuts to DEI or any of those kind of things when like our full history in this country has never been told. And so um the allure to lose all of that context of how do we get here, thinking about flooding in Milwaukee, why are water billows out of AmFam Stadium or certain parts of the North Side or State Fair because we've laid so much concrete on what was once a marsh. We don't have that context, so how do we make sense of those things? How do we make sense of people losing so much? Um, and so yes, I agree. It's how do we counter some of that allure, that seductiveness of like just making it very simple to disagree or to disparage other people. That's the work of humanities.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm trying to decide if like my role in every episode is to be slightly depressing, but I feel like, but I feel like in general, like critical thinking is tricky,
Mm,
and I think social media makes that much harder because you look at an image and like the image is a story as if the image, just showed up from outer space, on its own. And then now we're cutting all these things that like help give you the tools for critical thinking. And so, I'm going to do a little bit of a transition to, I think, what Wisconsin Humanities is trying to do now with doing some listening sessions, because I
mhm.
think part of what the listening sessions is I think trying to do is, okay, all you different communities in Wisconsin, what do you need? How can the tools of whatever the better word for humanities is do to help you? Because we have a pretty deep toolkit.
Right.
Um, so do you know anything? I mean, Jessica and I don't work there anymore. I mean, not officially. I mean, we do the podcast, but uh, can you tell us a little bit about what the listening sessions are going to
Yeah,
be? Yeah.
yeah. No. So depressing transition into like uplifting transition.
There
Well
you
done,
go.
Jen.
There you go. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
That's
you.
really good. Yeah, the listening sessions I think are crucial for the future of Wisconsin Humanities, however that looks, but also a really important time for communities to be able to be heard and convene. And so basically, what it is Wisconsin Humanities, a board member, a grantee, and I think maybe another community member will be going from or convening in different locations across the state. And there's kind of going to be like a tour format of sorts, which I'm very excited about. And at these events, which will be held locally, I think the goal is anywhere from 15 to 30 people will kind of convene. And the idea is, in journalism, we call it asset framing. And that's what are the strengths of your community? What do you do well? What do you want to see more of? So
Mhm.
really kind of leaning into this, what can we build off of? And I think of it as a mix of oral history where you're talking to people about what is this place because we're not the experts. Like, I know we're going to try to draw board members from the locations where the listening sessions are being held so that there's some authenticity, some knowledge of the area. But oftentimes, 10 minutes down the block in Milwaukee, someone knows their neighborhood much better than I'll ever know it. someone's
Right.
been there in the same home that they've been in for 40 years. So oral history practices really give us the tools to kind of ask questions, be curious, build our knowledge base from someone who has the knowledge that we do not have. And so the listening sessions are really going to do that. They're gonna be these very intentional conversations to do this asset framing, this building of communities, and really kind of help steer where humanities goes in the future, what our initiatives look like as we go into the future, really focusing in on specifically targeted communities, really shaping the work that we do through community voices, which has been some of the most rewarding work in my life. When you let the community let you know what they need and not people who think we know what's going on kind of dictate what the community wants. And then we wonder, oh, why aren't they engaging with anything that we make? I think it's going to be a really refreshing uh, event, series of events, and kind of just like I was saying, I think it's just really important for people to be heard now. You're seeing these town halls pop up all across the nation, including in Wisconsin, and people have a lot to say.
Yeah.
People want to be heard. There's a lot that's happening and changing. And so we're really hoping that this is, again, more of a positive experience for folks. But if people have big thoughts, big emotions, like we want to hear that. We want to
Yeah.
hear where they want more information, where they feel like we could step in and help out. And yeah, no, it should be a really exciting series of events and tour.
Well, thank
Well,
you for your involvement.
yeah.
This is the board work. This is what I'm like. I hope I don't mess this up.
I mean, there's nothing to mess up. I mean, you came into an organization that like lost all its funding, like what, so now you're building
True.
up. Like anything you do is a success.
Oh my gosh, that's asset framing for me to not have
Yeah,
to worry about anything.
exactly. Yeah, it's a rebuilding, it's a rethinking, all that. Yeah. We should probably move this towards the end since I'm looking at the time.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, we've been talking.
yeah. So, I mean, well, before I say like, hey, thanks for all this, is there anything else you want to say?
I think there's something. So, like I said, I've been in traditional newsrooms. I've been in narrative podcast spaces, both large and small production companies. I've been in nonprofit, like startup, really cool newsrooms as well. And I think if I could make a call to something or highlight something, within podcasting right now, if people do listen to podcasts, narrative ones, but also the chatcast is what's happening right now is there's been a corporatization of that industry. What does that mean? Like maybe this is how everything works. Well, I would say what it means is that your favorite indie makers, which if we recall the pandemic, everyone existed on art because we were pretty much, quarantined inside by ourselves and I think art was probably never more appreciated. Those people and those stories are going away. And folks like Spotify and Sony are buying up those production companies. And a lot of good people are losing their jobs. It just happened at Wondery. I think it was over 100 people lost their jobs this past week. And so that content doesn't get made. Those people do not have professions. Those are some of, in my experience, the most skilled storytellers that exist. That's also happening to our news ecosystem. And there are really cool nonprofits that pop up. I'm thinking of Outlier Media, which I had the honor to work with in Detroit. But there are still these huge gaps in local coverage and local news. And we're seeing it as well now with public media and the cutting of CPB funding. And listen, Madison, Wisconsin Public Radio, Milwaukee Public Radio will be, for the most part, okay. It's like 6% and 9% of the budget, respectively. So there's a future in both of these organizations. But it's the smaller organizations that are really uh, the lifeblood of some communities. I'm thinking of the only indigenous radio station in the state of Wisconsin, which is probably going to be losing a ton of funding. And, I'm talking with their CEO now, and it sounds like we'll have a tough time existing in the future. And that is the lifeblood, like I said, to that community to get news that they rely on. So what is happening is this kind of corporatization or destruction of news ecosystems, storytelling, the people that we really rely on to get us through the day, to make sense of the world, that it's important to, it's easy to not pay attention to, but it's important to keep alive because we have these events like, this 1,000-year flood that just happened in Wisconsin, or the tragic flooding in the Driftless that humanities is trying to make a sense of. So I guess that would be like my last kind of pitch, is like, pay attention to your local news, support your local news, support your storytellers. You may not think that they matter or that important to you until you're inside after work and you just want to decompress or make sense of the world in an entertaining way. And they're there for you. They're the voices that you rely on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or until some dramatic event happens and you really need to make sense of it.
Absolutely.
Well, Jimmy, I appreciate you sort of bringing up sort of what's happening in our media of all kind landscapes, and how it's harder and harder to sort of hear what's really happening in local communities. So I appreciate you bringing that in. And I think, I first, so glad that we had a chance to talk to you. And I first, of course, learned of you and heard you is when we worked on season 1 of the podcast. And I just was like, as someone who was working on like the transcript, I was like so impressed with how you were able to sort of add that, I don't know what the right word is, but sort of the like media outlook, sort of like how you were able to piece together the story and the bigger picture. And so I'm so glad that I had a chance to work with you in various capacities, and glad we had a chance to talk with you. And yeah, thanks for joining us on a what's today? What is today? We are first thing in the morning, people. Like we are like pre-shower on Zoom right now
Yes.
before everyone headed off on their busy day. So thank you so much.
Jen, that's so kind. I appreciate it. It's been a joy to work together and read about your bagel quest.
Oh yes, well, of course.
Yeah, and again, Jessica, I think you guys are naturals at what you're doing. This has been a lot of fun to listen to, and to be a part of, even if it is pre-shower.
Thank you. And I have to say, as someone who cares deeply for Wisconsin Humanities after a long and beautiful career there, I am happy to have it in your hands as a board member. So I'm thrilled to know that you're part of steering that ship, that important ship. Thank you for what you're
Oh,
doing.
thank you. I appreciate that. That's just more added pressure. That's all I hear. So, but I'll utilize it effectively. It'll be good. I'll be fine. I thank you very much.
You're in good company. It's a great board.
It's a great board. All right. Bye,
All
team.
right,
Thank you.
good to see you. Bye.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I hadn't gotten to talk to Jimmy since he's been on the board, and I love hearing about the ways that he's bringing himself to the work of Wisconsin Humanities right now. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that was good too. And it seems like, interesting timing to be talking to him while he's like in the midst of reporting on the flood, and just how that connects to how Wisconsin Humanities first worked with him, working on that podcast episode. So yeah, it's fun to talk to someone who like professionally talks to people. So that was great.
That was great. And we'll put a link to that episode about the flood in the Driftless, Stories from the Flood, the project is called. We'll put a link in the show notes. And yeah, and I think we can also invite you all to follow along to Wisconsin Humanities socials so you keep up with where these listening sessions are and turn out to add your voice to the story of what's happening in our state right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the approaches I appreciate that Wisconsin Humanities is taking, which I think is just the approach to be taking right now, which is, okay, everything's being torn down. We're going to do everything we can to make sure we can rebuild. And so like, let's start rebuilding and preparing. And so I think, yeah, that's sort of the best way to do it. And Jimmy is just has all the skills needed to sort of help do that well. So yeah, so we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. So thanks for listening. We have Jimmy's stamp of approval that, you should be listening. So thank you. And yeah, what else do we say at the end of the episode?
That's it. Have a great day and tell your friends.
Oh, and thanks to Chrissy for doing all the audio work for us.
Yeah, thanks to Chrissy Widmeyer, who's an amazing sound editor and makes this show sound so good. Thanks, Chrissy.
See you next time.